Early human life was not experienced as history unfolding, but as an endless present shaped by repetition, fatigue, attention, and the quiet discipline of staying alive. Days began not with intention, but with awareness as individuals woke slowly listening before moving, checking the air, the light, the position of others. Because survival depended on noticing small changes rather than making plans. There was no sense of progress, only continuity as tasks repeated themselves with little variation, gathering the same foods, walking the same paths, repairing the same tools, and watching the same children grow gradually stronger. Early humans learned to conserve energy because exhaustion could be fatal and unnecessary movement attracted danger. Silence was common and communication minimal, not because thought was limited, but because sound carried risk. Much of life unfolded internally as memory guided behavior, teaching where pain had occurred, where loss had happened, and where safety had once been found. Hunger was not dramatic, but constant, a dull pressure that shaped patience and restraint, forcing early humans to balance effort with reward and avoid waste. They did not romanticize nature, but treated it as an unpredictable force that could nourish or destroy without warning. Shelter offered no comfort, only brief protection, and sleep was light, interrupted, and cautious. Tools were extensions of habit rather than innovation, shaped slowly by repeated use and necessity. Time passed without measurement, marked only by light, temperature, and bodily need. In this way, early humans endured not through dominance or creativity, but through discipline, awareness, and the quiet mastery of routine, allowing life to continue in a world that never adapted to them. Social life among early humans was shaped less by emotion and more by proximity, tolerance, and shared endurance, as individuals learned to exist together without constant conflict, because separation often meant death. Groups formed naturally through familiarity and repeated survival rather than deliberate bonding, and members recognized one another through movement, posture, and behavior long before faces carried meaning. There was little privacy and little ownership, as food, tools, and space circulated through use rather than possession, creating a collective rhythm that reduced competition. Children absorbed behavior, continuously watching adults move, react, and respond to the environment, learning when to remain still, when to flee, and when to act without explanation or instruction. Teaching occurred through exposure, not guidance, as mistakes carried immediate consequences. Early humans became sensitive to one another's states, noticing injury, fatigue, or distress because the condition of one affected the safety of all. Care was practical, not sentimental, as helping the injured preserved group strength and knowledge. Conflict existed, but was muted, resolved through distance avoidance or group pressure rather than violence, because injury weakened survival. Emotional expression was restrained, but not absent, as comfort was offered through presence, proximity, and shared activity rather than words. Loss altered behavior as groups avoided places associated with danger and adjusted routines following deaths. Over time, this created a shared memory embedded in movement rather than story, shaping behavior across generations. Early human society was not organized or symbolic, but functional, adaptive, and grounded in the understanding that endurance required cooperation, restraint, and attentiveness to both the environment and one another. In a world where nothing was guaranteed and everything had to be earned repeatedly. Risk defined every movement of early human life, not as an abstract concept, but as a constant calculation carried in the body rather than the mind, as each decision weighed effort against danger without conscious thought. Early humans learned through pain, loss, and observation which actions carried unacceptable cost and which risks were necessary to continue living. Stepping into tall grass meant hidden predators, climbing meant possible injury, crossing water meant uncertainty and delay, yet remaining still too long meant hunger and exposure. The body became the first teacher, as cuts, infections, broken bones, and exhaustion shaped future behavior more effectively than memory alone. Injury was feared not because of pain, but because it reduced mobility, awareness, and contribution, placing the individual and the group at risk. Early humans moved carefully, conserving joints, muscles, and strength, knowing that recovery was slow and often incomplete. Fear was not panic, but alertness, a constant readiness to respond that sharpened senses and guided restraint. Decisions were rarely bold and rarely impulsive because survival favored those who hesitated, observed, and waited for favorable conditions. Risk was shared as groups acted together when danger was unavoidable, distributing exposure rather than isolating individuals. Over time, early humans developed an embodied intelligence, recognizing subtle warning signs in the environment, changes in animal behavior, silent shifts in wind and light that signaled danger before it appeared. This sensitivity reduced unnecessary loss and allowed survival in landscapes filled with threats beyond physical strength. Life became a balance between movement and stillness, effort and rest, courage and caution, shaped by countless small decisions that favored endurance over heroism and continuity over conquest. The early human body was not merely a vessel for survival, but an active participant in shaping behavior, memory, and social interaction. As physical condition influenced status, contribution, and safety within the group, strength, endurance, and mobility mattered not as ideals, but as practical necessities, and individuals adjusted their roles according to ability rather than hierarchy. Those injured or weakened shifted toward tasks requiring less movement, such as tool preparation, vigilance, or childcare, maintaining usefulness while reducing risk. Pain taught restraint, and recovery demanded patience, as pushing the body beyond limits often resulted in lasting damage or death. Early humans learned to read one another's physical states, noticing changes in movement, breathing, posture, and responsiveness, because these signs affected group decisions. Travel pace adapted to the slowest member, and routes were chosen to minimize strain, even if longer, because injury threatened survival more than delay. Fear of the body failing shaped caution and fostered cooperation, as shared effort reduced individual burden. Aging was not measured in years, but in accumulated, whereas joints stiffened, reaction slowed, and vulnerability increased, yet elders remained valuable for their experience and memory. The body also shaped emotional life, as proximity, warmth, shared labor, and rest regulated stress and strengthened bonds without symbolic expression. Early humans trusted bodily knowledge more than thought, responding to discomfort, fatigue, and instinct as guides to action. In this way, survival was deeply physical, grounded in awareness of limits and preservation of capacity rather than domination or expansion, allowing early humans to endure environments that offered no protection and no second chances. Memory shaped early human life not as stories or symbols, but as patterns embedded in movement, behavior, and avoidance. As individuals and groups carried the past forward through habit rather than reflection. Places held meaning without names, as certain paths were chosen repeatedly while others were avoided. Because something had happened there, injury, loss, fear, or scarcity that left an imprint on behavior. Early humans returned to familiar water sources not because they understood geography, but because survival had once succeeded there and repetition reduced uncertainty. The landscape became a living record of experience, marked not by signs, but by internal recognition. As bodies responded differently to safe ground than to exposed or dangerous terrain. Silence often followed loss, as groups altered routines without discussion, changing routes, timing, and behavior after a death or injury, as if the land itself had become altered. Children absorbed these changes without explanation, learning which places were approached cautiously and which were entered without fear, through observation rather than instruction. Over generations, these patterns formed continuity, allowing survival knowledge to persist even as individuals died and groups changed. Memory was collective yet unspoken, carried forward through repetition and restraint rather than deliberate preservation. This form of memory reduced risk and stabilized survival, allowing early humans to navigate complex environments without maps or language. In this way, the past remained present, shaping daily decisions quietly and persistently, ensuring that experience outlived the individual and survival knowledge endured beyond any single lifetime. Death was a constant presence in early human life, not as a mystery to be explained, but as a reality to be managed through adjustment and endurance. Individuals disappeared suddenly through injury, illness, predation, or exhaustion, leaving gaps that altered group dynamics and survival capacity. Early humans did not ritualize death in symbolic ways, but responded through changes in behavior, silence, and proximity. as groups stayed closer, moved more cautiously, or avoided certain areas following loss. Bodies were not ignored nor transformed into objects of ceremony, but treated with practical care, moved away from living spaces or protected from scavengers to reduce risk. The emotional impact of death was expressed through withdrawal, altered routines, and heightened vigilance rather than visible mourning. Children learned about mortality not through teaching, but through absence, noticing who no longer moved with the group and how behavior changed afterward. This awareness fostered caution and attentiveness as loss reinforced the fragility of survival. Continuity depended on adjustment rather than resistance, as early humans accepted death as part of existence and focused on maintaining life through cooperation and restraint. Over time, this acceptance shaped resilience, allowing groups to recover, reorganize, and continue despite repeated loss. Life was not seen as sacred or expendable, but as something to be protected through effort, awareness, and shared responsibility. In this way, early humans endured a world that offered no permanence by adapting to loss without surrendering to it, preserving continuity through quiet persistence rather than meaning or explanation. Time for early humans was not something measured or imagined into the future, but something felt through change in the body, the land, and the rhythm of survival. As seasons altered availability, risk, and movement, gradual shifts shaped behavior slowly as climate patterns forced adjustments in migration, shelter, and diet without awareness of long-term transformation. Early humans did not recognize themselves as changing, but adapted, continuously responding to immediate conditions while carrying forward habits that had once ensured survival. Over generations, tools became slightly more refined, movement more efficient, and cooperation more coordinated, not through deliberate innovation, but through accumulated experience and selective endurance. Children grew into adults, shaped by environments already modified by previous behavior paths, cleared shelters reused, and routines established long before their birth. This layering of behavior across time created stability even as conditions shifted, allowing survival strategies to evolve without conscious planning. Early humans lived inside this slow change, unaware that their bodies, minds, and social structures were gradually diverging from earlier hominids. The ability to delay action, anticipate consequence, and adjust behavior based on collective experience marked a subtle transformation, not announced by symbols or language, but expressed through restraint, patience, and shared decision-making. Over long spans of time, this adaptability allowed early humans to occupy diverse environments, expanding not through conquest, but through careful adjustment. Humanity did not arrive suddenly, but emerged quietly through countless small changes repeated across generations, driven by necessity rather than ambition. What ultimately distinguished early humans from earlier hominids was not dominance, intelligence, or creativity alone, but the capacity to sustain cooperation, memory, and restraint across time, allowing survival beyond individual strength or lifespan. Groups persisted because knowledge endured through behavior patterns, care for the vulnerable, and sensitivity to risk rather than individual achievement. Early humans became defined by their ability to maintain continuity, preserving life through shared responsibility and adaptive discipline. They lived without names for themselves, without stories explaining their existence, and without certainty of tomorrow, yet built lives that extended beyond the moment through cooperation and memory. Their humanity was not symbolic or expressive, but practical, rooted in survival choices that balanced effort, risk, and care. This quiet humanity allowed early humans to persist through harsh environments, loss, and uncertainty, shaping a lineage capable of reflection, meaning, and culture in later ages. The world gave them nothing freely and offered no guidance. Yet through endurance, attentiveness, and mutual reliance, they continued. From these unnamed lives emerged the foundations of human existence, not through triumph or revelation, but through persistence, adaptation, and the willingness to endure together. Long before history recorded humanity, it was lived slowly, silently, and continuously by early humans who survived not by changing the world, but by learning how to remain within it. As early humans continued to endure across generations, their relationship with the environment deepened into a quiet understanding, shaped by observation rather than control, as they learned not only where to survive, but when to wait, withdraw, or adapt. Weather patterns, animal movement, and seasonal shifts slowly became familiar rhythms guiding behavior without formal knowledge or explanation. Early humans began to anticipate change, sensing scarcity before it arrived, and preparing through movement, storage, and cooperation rather than panic. This anticipation marked a subtle shift in awareness as survival was no longer purely reactive but increasingly guided by expectation and collective memory. Groups adjusted travel timing, shared resources more deliberately, and protected the young with greater attentiveness. Recognizing that continuity depended on future generations as much as present survival. Communication expanded through gesture, sound, and expression, not to tell stories, but to coordinate effort, warn of danger, and reinforce group cohesion. These early forms of shared understanding strengthened bonds and reduced isolation, allowing larger groups to function with greater stability. Though life remained harsh, uncertain, and fragile, early humans demonstrated an increasing capacity to endure prolonged hardship through planning, patience, and mutual reliance. This growing sensitivity to time, environment, and one another further separated them from earlier hominids, shaping a way of life rooted not only in survival, but in sustained collective existence across changing conditions. Over long spans of time, these accumulated behaviors laid the groundwork for transformations that early humans themselves never recognized as change, yet would eventually define humanity. Shared routines hardened into traditions, unspoken expectations guided conduct, and cooperation became instinctive rather than situational. Early humans learned to value stability over impulse, choosing familiarity over risk, and continuity over short-term gain. Children grew up within these structured patterns, inheriting not just physical traits, but behaviors shaped by generations of endurance. Gradually, this allowed the emergence of stronger social bonds, deeper trust, and a growing sense of belonging that extended beyond immediate necessity. Though they still lived without names, symbols, or written memory, early humans carried forward something enduring, a shared way of being that outlasted individuals and moments. From this slow and visible process emerged the foundations of culture, morality, and identity that later humans would articulate through language, belief, and art. The lives of early humans were not defined by achievement or conquest, but by persistence, adaptation, and care carried forward quietly through time. In enduring a world that gave nothing freely, they created the conditions for humanity to eventually understand itself, marking the final step in a journey that began not with intention, but with survival.